We are live. Again, everyone, I am obviously not Ken Benson. My apologies. He could not be here today. I'm going to do the very best I can to fill in for him and hopefully make him proud. Welcome to our Global Radio Ideas webinar. Certainly appreciate you watching wherever you are in the world, and obviously a lot of you from all different parts of the world, which is really cool and very grateful. Thank you so much for taking your time to be with us here today. My name is Dave Chachi Dennis. I am the president of Benztown, and joining me, which is also an honor, as my partner and dear friend and our CEO, Andy Sonneman from Stuttgart, Germany. Andy, say hello.
Hey guys, I'm also not Ken Benson. I apologize for that as well. Obviously, there's the two better looking guys on Webinar Jam today than Ken Benson. That's fine. So Ken, if you can see that maybe later. We're really sorry you could not make it today. So guys, thanks for joining us so much. This is Programming in 2021, What It Takes to Win, with our dear friend Gary Berkowitz. As always, the chat box is activated. Let us know where you're watching. If you have questions for us, please post it. We'll be taking questions later in the show. And I'll hand it over to you, Chach, to introduce our man of the match, man of today.
Thank you. And it's actually so neat to spend time with this incredible programmer and consultant. We have known of each other, I think, for years, but this is the first time we've actually gotten to spend some time together. So I'm really looking forward to this. His resume includes stints at numerous legendary American radio stations, including being the founding program director of CHR 92 Pro FM in Providence, Rhode Island. He then transformed ROR Boston for oldies to one of the first AC formats in the U.S. From there, he moved to Detroit, where he currently resides, to program the powerhouse News Talk WJR and CHR HYT, and then launched one of America's first hot ACs, Q95, with the infamous Dick Burton Morning Show. Our guest has been consulting radio stations ever since and specializes in only one format today, AC. So he really is the definition of a true pure play. Joining us from the Motor City, Detroit, Michigan, the home of Motown, welcome radio consultant Gary Berkowitz.
Hey guys, thank you so much. I am really honored and so excited to be here today, and hearing where people are signing on from is it blows my mind, with the incredible technology that we have, especially for so many of the people from outside of the U.S. To me, that's very, very exciting. So thank you.
Great. So I think let's get it, as people are waiting to learn from you, Gary. So like we heard, your impressive career. I mean, you accomplished a lot. You worked in multiple formats for and with iconic stations as a programmer, coach, consultant. You work with so much legendary talent. But we usually begin this by asking people, and you in this case, tell us something people don't know about Gary Berkowitz.
Well, I've been thinking about this question now for a long, long time, and I'm gonna try to make it somewhat interesting and exciting. But I actually have a couple of things that I wanted to share. Number one, I have flown over 2 million air miles, and I don't mean credit card miles. I mean flown miles, and they've all been done domestically. How amazing is that? 2 million miles, all on one airline. Well, actually two, because it was Northwest and then Delta acquired Northwest, but all on one airline. So that's a heck of a lot of travel, which is one thing people might not know. But the second thing is really that before I got into radio, my first love was music, and I am a drummer, and I just had some of the best years ever playing in bar mitzvahs and weddings all over the New York area. When I was I started off when I was in junior high school and did it all through high school and most of college, playing in bands all over the New York area. So weddings and bar mitzvahs, that was my deal before radio. So, and the third thing was I have absolutely no regrets about anything professionally. I've had the most incredible career and continue to have the most incredible career. But if sometimes people will say, "What's your one regret?" And I say, I don't think I have any, but there's one little one, and that is that I never got the chance to be on the air on the radio station that first adopted me and kind of took me in, let me be an intern before people called kids who hung out at radio stations, interns. I was kind of the kid, the schlep. But I never got to be on the air on WGBB, a little AM station, a little 1,000-watt AM station on Long Island. When I think about that, I said, boy, I would have just loved to have had 1 hour on the all-night show on that radio station. But that's the only regret that I've got going on right now. So 2 million miles on Delta, a bar mitzvah drummer.
That's some great factoids. Thank you for sharing. Were you a big fan of the late Charlie Watts growing up?
I actually wasn't, Chachi. It's interesting. There were a lot of groups that were out back then when I was first coming up in radio, that I almost saw. I was a pop guy. I grew up listening to WABC and WMCA in New York, and I was a pure pop music guy. And when some of that music started coming in, some of it was like almost threatening to me. As it was like, well, we don't want to play this kind of music on our, this is like, this rock music is like, it's not the pop stuff. So I was never a big Rolling Stones fan, but as the years went on, I will tell you, I became a big fan of the Rolling Stones, and actually went to see them. They played the opening concert at Ford Field here in Detroit when Ford Field first opened.
Oh wow, that must have been an incredible show.
Well, and the backstory on that show is that, and since everybody on this call is in radio, you'll appreciate this. I could not get comped on those tickets. I tried so hard. I pulled every card that I had to get comp tickets for that show and couldn't get it. And looking back on it, I paid $700 a ticket to see the Rolling Stones. Oh. And I will tell you, my wife and I both said it was the greatest show we ever saw. It was beyond incredible. It was kind of sad to hear about Charlie Watts and the first guy really to leave that great institution of the Rolling Stones.
So Gary, we're going to get into now the heart. I got to keep us on track and be a good program director here. You've obviously been working in radio programming for a long time, and you've survived and thrived throughout the years, no matter the format nor the market. Now, even before COVID, radio has been facing unparalleled challenges. It's 2021. What does it take to win today?
Boy, that's a loaded question. There's so many things that it takes to win. And there are moments where I think that a lot of us know what it takes to win. Yet sometimes I feel as though the powers that are controlling radio just don't want to hear it. Because there's such a push-pull on the product side, on the economic side. But I think if I had to boil it down, to one thing, I would always say, what is radio all about? And radio is not necessarily about all music. Radio is really about the combination of music and personality. I mean, that's what made radio great from its earliest days. And we may hit on this a little bit as we go forward, but it's killing me to see so many people losing their jobs, and they're coming from the on-air side. And to me, that is the most critical, important part of radio. It's that human side. You say, well, what does it take to win in 2021? And I go back to my earliest days, and I'm sure that there's a lot of different people on this phone call right now who are younger than me and maybe a little bit older than me, who remember. I always say, remember, why did you get into radio for the first time? And when you talk to radio people, very few radio people will say, I got into radio because of the music. Most radio people are going to tell you they got into it because of the excitement that came from the personality side of our industry. It might have been a disc jockey. It might have been a newsman. It might have been a sportscaster. It might have been a talk show host. But most radio people will tell you, when I was a kid, I used to listen to so-and-so on the air, and I said, that's what I want to do. That's who I want to be. And I can tell you for sure that was my story. I will never, ever forget, my first introduction into radio. I was watching a remote broadcast in Times Square in New York City. My parents took me into New York City for the day, and I saw that disc jockey behind the microphone, and I said, Mom, Dad, this is what I want to do. That's what I want to do. So that's a big part of the winning. It's killing me to see so many talented people on the sidelines right now in radio. But if I had to really narrow it down, Chachi, I would say go back to the basics. What made radio great? And really specialize in those basics, and you won't go wrong.
Talking about specializing, your consultancy, Gary, is obviously very different than the consultancies of a lot of other people, also of the people we interviewed on that webinar already. So you specialize in just one format, and that's AC. So, why? I think the question is twofold. Why is that? And what can other formats learn from AC?
Well, there's a little bit of a backstory on why I chose AC and why I do AC. It really goes back to when I decided to get into the consulting business. One of the leading researchers in the States here, Bill Moyes, was really a good friend and very, very helpful to me in the early days. And he felt it was I called him and I said, well, Bill, I've got experience in CHR and Top 40. I've got experience in AC. I've got experience. I was the program director of WJR and WPRO in Providence, WPRO's AM station, which were news talks stations. Should I do all these formats? And he said, no. You really got to be narrow, and you've got to find one format that you'll be the specialist in. And I chose AC because I always felt that it was a format that would be around for a long time. And I felt it was a format that, as time went on, I'd be able to, stay totally in touch with it. So I kind of, a little bit at random, said, yeah, let's do AC. And I'm really, really glad I did. Now, I will tell you that over the years, I've been involved with many, many radio stations that are not AC stations. As consolidation came through, and a lot of my clients all of a sudden grew from having one or two radio stations to having 4 or 5 radio stations. I've been involved with and still do get involved with classic hits and many, many other formats, because I've always believed that the basics are the basics are the basics. I can put on any station in any format, and I may not necessarily know if the music is exactly right, but I can tell you pretty quickly if that station is well positioned, and if that station has the energy and the determination to really win.
That's really interesting. Sorry, Josh, a really quick side note. It's really interesting. I think we had a great guest who had kind of same feeling about this with this Thierry Chameux from EMG Europa Plus in Russia. If you want to watch back, for all the people who have not seen that webinar, so Thierry is talking a lot about the basics and about the stuff that Gary said like a second ago too. So sorry for interrupting.
Yeah, and if I could, Andy, just to add it on there, radio in its simplest form is so simple and easy, and it's that incredible theater of the mind, of taking all the different elements that we have, whether it's a disc jockey, certainly the music, promotions, and everything that makes up a radio station. It's up to us, to make that work. And, the basics are still the basics there. No matter what language you're in, no matter what world you're in, if you're no matter what country you're in, it's really still the same today.
We're chatting with Gary Berkowitz from Berkowitz Consulting, Broadcast Consulting. If you've got a question for Gary, he's going to be answering them here in just a few minutes. Please ask it in the chat box. And Gary, you talk a lot about the music connection between AC and CHR. In fact, you've said when CHR gets a cold, AC gets pneumonia. Can you explain?
Yes, absolutely. AC is one of those formats that has never been successful at producing its own songs. AC has always been a tough format because it's been so gold-based over the years, for the most part. It's just never been good at developing AC-only artists. So what I call it is, I call AC kind of a feeder format. And the majority of the music that you hear on AC comes from two formats. Country on one side to a degree, and the other one, the real big one, is CHR. If you look at any AC playlist today, at any successful, or at any AC station period, it will look like a CHR playlist from whatever year was that music was released. So, we're kind of like a feeder format. We take the best of CHR. And we take a lot over the years is coming from country, but CHR is really the big one. And whenever CHR, the CHR format is going through one of its moments, and like everything, I mean, it has its cycles. It has cycles where there's a lot of greatness. To quote the legendary Guy Napoleon, it has doldrums, and he has the whole theory on music cycle, and he's totally right about it. So when things in CHR are rough, things in AC are really, really rough. Right now, we're going through a bit of a rough patch. I would say the majority of the AC stations now, have barely added a new song or can barely see testing on new songs from the last year and a half. It's just not there. So that's why I always say when CHR gets cold, AC gets a pneumonia, because at the heart of it all, every programmer out there, it doesn't matter what format you're in, we all are still, we love new music. We all want to be the one, we want to play that new music, those new songs, to add them in, into our libraries. So right now we're in a little bit of the pneumonia stage, but hopefully it's going to get better.
One add-on to that, has the pandemic impacted the product cycle? Have artists held back records similar to what we've seen with studios holding back movies?
I don't know the answer to that one, because I don't get too into the the decisions that get made on releasing. But they're just really there's not been a lot of crossover new CHR that's made it over to AC in a long time.
I mean, we got a lot of rhythmic music right now, I think, in the CHR. Obviously, I know because I do a lot of CHR production still myself. So there's a lot of rhythmic stuff that doesn't resonate, I think, very well with the AC listenership, while we had like a more dance or more pop type of music new releases the last years before. So that crossed over, I think, more easily than the rhythmic stuff. So. Yes. Gary, I mean, we had this question a little bit in terms of like a couple minutes ago, but if we hone in on that a little bit, because I'm really interested. I mean, you've been a student of the radio business for a very long time. I mean, you're around forever. So is there anything we can take from the glorious past, basically, that might help us navigate like a very unknown or what seems to be a complicated future for the medium of radio? Is there anything that comes to mind?
Yeah, lots of things, Andy, come to mind. And look, and anybody who knows me knows what I'm about to say. And that is, I always say, I look at radio a lot, and I talk about food a lot. I compare radio to the food business, to the experience. In other words, when somebody puts on the radio, it's a lot like your experience when you walk into a restaurant. You want to make sure you have good service. You want to make sure you have good food. And I talk about that all the time, but think of radio like a builder thinks of a house. You've got to have a great foundation on your home. I mean, if you don't have a good foundation on that house, whoever buys that house is going to have lifelong problems with that house on a not good foundation. And a radio station is the same thing. It needs a solid foundation. It needs, that the foundation has to be poured properly. And I always check with my stations. I'll go, well, let's see how we're doing on the basics. I'm like the doctor, when you go into the doctor, they always take your weight. They always take your blood pressure. Those are their basics. They always want to make sure, they always ask you the same questions, no matter what kind of a doctor you go to, because those are the basic questions that give them answers about your health as a patient. And I do the same thing with the radio stations. I always like to go in and look at the basics, that the station is built upon. How are you doing, at identifying yourself? How are you doing with your positioning? How are you doing, with your music? So I look at all those basic things, because radio is no different than running a restaurant, and radio is certainly no different than building the construction. Building a building or building a home. You've got to have good basics.
Today's webinar is called What It Takes to Win 2021. When we had Lee Abrams on recently, he told us radio needs to stop using the 1980s programming techniques and reimagine and rewrite the playbook for radio today. So do the programming basics still matter now?
Oh, I absolutely think they do. And, there's nobody more brilliant than Lee Abrams. I love Lee Abrams and consider myself very lucky that I got to work with him, many years ago. He is not only a visionary, but he's a current area. He knows exactly what's going on right now. And he's absolutely right. I had this conversation the other day with one of the program directors that I work with. We were listening to some imaging, and I said, why are there Star Wars zaps on here? And why are there explosions going off in the middle of this promo? It's like, God, this is so 1982, yet that stuff is all over a lot of the imaging packages that are out there. And I don't know, why it is, and I believe Lee, said something to the effect of that we have to develop some new signature ways of identifying ourselves on the radio and at our radio stations. And I could not agree with that more. That a lot of the stuff that we do, really is, a little bit old school. Some of it's okay, but some of it really needs to be updated in that regard.
Okay, so Star Wars. So hopefully we don't use too many Star Wars zips and zaps anymore these days. So, but I'm totally getting what you're saying.
Andy, that's a very good thing.
Absolutely. I mean, it's whatever the clients want. So we're going to give them Star Wars zips and zaps. No, I'm just kidding. So I mean, most of the media companies today and going away from Star Wars and imaging is talk about content, right? It's always content. So Bob Pittman, obviously everybody knows, CEO of iHeart, talks more about companionship. So what are your thoughts about content versus companionship?
Well, let me just start by saying that I kind of think that Bob, my friend Bob Pittman, may have borrowed the content or companionship line from me, because I've been out there for years now talking about it. I actually think when I first penned the first article about content or companionship, and I started out by saying, I think companionship is more important than content. Looking back at it, that was kind of a gutsy thing for me to do, because sometimes all you read about is content. Now, I think content's important. Don't get me wrong. I don't want to be quoted by Gary Berkowitz doesn't think content's important. Of course it is. But there's nothing more important than when you turn on the radio, it be your companion, that the radio be something that is going to keep you company, that is going to kind of feel like your friend. And so when I first wrote companionship, content or companionship, and I'm glad that Bob borrowed that, I really am. But I stand by it. I still believe companionship is more important than content when it comes to radio.
Does that goes for all the formats, Gary? Like you feel that's necessary for all the formats, not just for AC?
Yes, absolutely. I'm not sure that I even think that the all news format is very, very companionship driven. I think if you're, no matter what you're in, if you're in rock, if you're in country, certainly. I mean, look, CHR. Because I kind of grew up in the CHR format and got to work for some of the greatest top 40 radio stations in America. I mean, those stations were all about the jocks. To me, the music was filler. The music was important, but the music was filler. And when I look back to some of the air staff that I got to work with and the magic that these guys created, that's what made those stations so immensely successful in their day. And a lot of those stations to this day are still in the same format. Pro FM, which was my first PD gig, and I was the first PD at Pro FM. And we were just talking about it because my old job is open again. But, that station was built on personality. And it was built on personality because that's where I grew up. I grew up listening to WABC. Arguably probably one of the greatest radio stations and personality radio stations of all time.
We've got two more questions for you, Gary, and then we're going to get to everyone else's questions. I've already seen several come in. If you've got a question for Gary, please enter it now into the chat box, and we're going to get there in just a couple minutes. Staying in touch with the consumer is essential to the success for any business. Budget constraints aside, what consumer information and tools do you really need to win?
Yeah, and that's really been a challenge. First and foremost, I love any kind of listener feedback that I can get, and that's probably one of the things that social media, has really given us, the opportunity to have, is that instantaneous feedback when you do something on your social media page. But I'm a big believer in research. It's been very challenging for the past decade or so to get the budget for research. But I love doing music tests. I love doing strategic research. And the line that I use a lot, and again, if you know me, you've heard this line before, I would much rather argue the facts than the opinions. And, we are certainly in an industry that has a lot of opinions, which I respect. I've certainly got mine. And quite frankly, I get paid to give my opinion. But I always say, let's argue the facts, not the opinion.
Yeah, I mean, absolutely. We've seen the internet being very successful by providing the facts and not just the opinions. I think we'll wrap this up, and the last question would be twofold. So obviously you work with a lot of talent, Gary. So for me, be really interesting to hear about, and I bet for a lot of other people. So what is going on with talent in general? Meaning, is there a lot of strong and new talent that you are still discovering that you work with? And how do we convince, if there is a lot of talent, ownership of its importance for the stations, for the brands, coming back to the financial constraints type of answer that we had kind of before. So yeah, that would be my last question.
Yeah, boy, oh boy, that's a tough one. Let me take it this way. I hear a lot of young people today don't want to be in radio, and young people today aren't listening to the radio, and I don't know if I believe that. I still meet a lot of young people who would love to be involved in radio. I don't know if it's at the same fever pitch it was when I first got in, but there are still a lot of young people out there who want to get in radio, and I think the senior members of the radio community, which I consider myself one of them, it's our responsibility to take these young people under our wings and show them the way and teach them, just like Bob Lawrence at WGBB in Freeport, Long Island, took me under his wing. Just like I learned so much from my early mentors, my program directors at all the radio stations I worked for, Jay Clark at WPRO. Oh my God. I mean, I consider Jay Clark my program director for life because he taught me so much. So I think that it's our job to build the future personalities of radio. It's a little bit tougher working with some of the senior members who still want to be in. Sometimes those guys can be kind of tough. They can be a little bit on the, that's not how we used to do it. And I try to work with them a lot and say, hey guys, I know that's not how we used to do it, but let's talk about how we have to do it, because you can really do this well. Just put your mind to it and be open, to where we are today. Andy, as far as convincing the managers and the owners of talent, that's a tough one, because and COVID came at like the worst. Not that there was ever a good time for COVID to come, but I mean, when COVID hit, it really, caused an issue with talent in so many ways. But I just keep trying. I keep trying. I only work with a small world of radio people, and I constantly try to convince them of the importance of talent, of live talent. Okay, I'll say it. I can deal with voice tracking. I understand it. I get it. But there is nothing like a live disc jockey on the radio. So there, I said it.
I agree. I agree completely.
There's just nothing like it. Radio was built. Radio was invented to have a guy behind a microphone live, and that could be 10 more webinars talking about that one there. But I just try in my little way, and I would hope that everybody who's on this webinar right now, because I'm going to guess that the majority of people on the webinar now are programmers. All we can do is try our very, very best to get our bosses, our managers, our owners to understand the importance that their investment in that radio station is contingent upon talent. Anybody can play the same music, but when you have talent on the air that people love and want to listen to on a day-to-day basis, that's where the real win is.
Yeah, I agree, and also absolutely agrees. One of the most legendary, I think, programmers these days in the United States, Jimmy Steele, posted a comment here privately. Talent is the only sustainable advantage we have over all competitors on every platform. So amen, like Jimmy and Gary, obviously both great minds and same opinion about like how important is talent for what we do.
Oh yeah, I mean, look, you can look in any market in America, in the U.S. And you can see that the stations that continually are the winners, are the ones that have the talent. Jukeboxes just don't cut it. It just doesn't. I mean, it's all about the talent. Yeah.
We've got some great questions for you, Gary. If you've got a question, please enter it into the chat box. One thing I'm going to leave you with before we get there is Ken Benson tried to have your dear friend and former coworker, Tony Bristol, join us today. But unfortunately, he's on the air, so couldn't be on. But he wanted to share that you absolutely loved Christmas time and that you were in charge of decorating the station lobby, and you came up with one of the station's staple contests, the 12 Days of Christmas. We're talking about PRO. Where you would let listeners pick Christmas trees numbered from 1 to 92 and gave them the presents inside. And totally theater of the mind, he says, opening the boxes on the air. Gary loves jingles and might sing or play the PRO FM custom jingles walking up and down the halls. And the bond we created with our audience has lasted 47 years. So that is from your friend, Tony Bristol.
Well, thank you, Tony. I appreciate that. And, I met Tony Bristol when he was a member of the Pro FM Junior Achievement Club back in 1970 something, and he was, you talk about mentoring young people. He really broke through, and I said, boy, this Anthony Pescarino kid is really something, and we pulled him out and we groomed him, and he eventually went on the air for us, and eventually ended up being the program director at Pro FM. So that kind of goes back to the question earlier about young people in radio. He was certainly one of them. And the 12 Days of Christmas, I love Christmas time. A short little story. That's actually how I got my first gig at WPRO with Jay Clark. I was going to Emerson in Boston at the time, and I just wanted to work at WPRO. WPRO AM was the big top 40 station at the time, and I just loved that station and wanted to be a part of it. And I used to go to the station every day and like hang out in the lobby. And I would say, tell the program director, tell Mr. Clark I'll go get him his lunch. Tell Mr. Clark I'll get him his coffee, whatever he needs. Make a long story short, one day he said to me, hey, what? We need to put our Christmas decorations up in the lobby. Could you do that? And I said, yes, sir, Mr. Clark, done. And I called my girlfriend, who's been my wife for the past 47 some odd years. And I said to her, honey, we got to decorate the lobby at WPRO tonight. So, the Jewish girl from New Jersey and the Jewish boy from Long Island are now decorating the lobby of 24 Mason Street in Providence. And that's how my long and beautiful career at WPRO started.
Let's get to questions. Andy, do you want to take the first one?
Yeah. So Sean Vaughn says, I feel like radio has become two people should listen to us. I feel we should go to the listeners. We need to get more plugged into our communities. Would you agree?
Absolutely. Absolutely. There was one of the guys we had National Radio Day last week, and so there were 1 million posts on Facebook for National Radio Day, and we all put up our pictures and all of our memories and what have you. And Howard Hoffman, who was one of the legendary jocks on Pro FM, was writing about his experience at Pro, and he said, the station was this, the station was that, but most importantly, he said that station was everywhere, and we were. And when I look back, certainly at my career, every station I programmed made it a point of being everywhere we could. We got involved with everything that would let us get involved. So yes, I still think radio has got to be involved in everything. Certainly there's some events maybe you get a little more involved with than others, but absolutely, I would agree with that.
Joel Rabb asks, and my apologies, it just moved up here. Let me get down there. Joel Rabb asks, how do you convince management to invest in the product, air talent, for example, that we all agree is so important now?
Well, Joel is one of the great country consultants, and Joel and I work together a lot. And the answer to that, Joel, is we just have to keep trying. It's not easy, it's not easy. But I think you have to stay focused, and I think you have to be able to explain to the purse keepers, to the guys that are controlling the money, that there is a reward in making that investment, that the ROI is going to be well worth it. It's again, it kind of gets back to the talent part. Sometimes I think people look at the right side of the spreadsheet and they see a number and they just go, okay, that's out, and it just happens to be your most popular personality. Joel, we have to, as consultants who do have the ear of a lot of owners and managers and regional people, we just have to keep chipping away at it. I know that's kind of maybe a cop-out answer, but I think that's all we can do.
Next one comes from Scott Williams. Any secret tips for AC morning shows? I mean, that should be your wheelhouse 100%. So give us some secret tips, Gary.
Yes. Well, secret tip number one, you have to play a lot of music. Secret tip number two, okay? I have seen hundreds and hundreds of research projects over the years, and I'm going to give you the two things that I consistently see test at the bottom of the barrel, and one of the two things is all over a lot of AC morning shows, and I don't understand why. Number one, sports tests at the bottom of the barrel with AC listeners. Pretty easy to understand. The second thing, and this is a big one, is pop news, entertainment pop type news. Amazingly enough, with AC listenership, tests at the bottom of the barrel. So be real careful for that. Again, I'm going to come out and say it. I usually recommend if they're doing a benchmark with entertainment news, every day, the Dish or the Dirty at 30 or whatever they call it with AC stations. I don't think there's enough stuff in there to do it on a daily basis. When a big story comes out, if a big celebrity dies or if there's big celebrity news, make it a bit, make it content, make it part of the show. But I think I said this earlier. I'd rather argue the facts than the opinions, and the facts are that pop news thing with AC listeners is not all that high. So I would tread carefully with that.
We'll take this last question, Gary, and then we need to wrap up because we've ran a little bit late. So my apologies on that. Again, not nearly as good of a host as Ken Benson is, but Damian Fisher asks, and I'm not 100% sure I understand this question, but how often should a radio station do an outside broadcast? And I'm wondering if he means a remote broadcast. Does that question make sense to you?
Yeah, I think it's from outside somewhere, from a different location. I think that's what it means.
Yeah, I'm not sure there's a definitive answer on that. I will tell you that, I'm not big on remote broadcasts on the radio. I just don't think they necessarily translate. I know when I'm watching a TV show, whether it's one of the morning shows, Today Show, Good Morning America, or any of those, and they're on location. What they tend to do is the location takes over the whole show, and if I'm not interested in what that location is, I'm usually out of there. So for radio, I'm just not sure about the value of doing a remote broadcast.
Yes, and Damien did clarify that's exactly what he meant. So thank you for answering that, Gary. Thank you,
and especially, oh my God, when you still, you get an email from your sales manager and he says you have to do a remote at a car dealership. Oh my God. I mean, come on. Nobody's going to car dealerships anymore to see a radio disc jockey. It's just not happening.
I remember doing several of those earlier in my career. Gary, thank you so much for your time. It's been really an honor and a pleasure. Where do people find you?
Well, they can find me. Oh my God, I'm everywhere. I'm all over the place. Certainly GaryBurke.com is my website. I'm on Facebook, LinkedIn, Twitter, Instagram. If you just search Gary Berkowitz, I'll probably pop up. I do have an AC newsletter. It's called AC Programming Today. It is complimentary, and you can sign up on my website, which is GaryBurke.com. I have a YouTube channel, the AC Programming Today YouTube channel. So, I am so overexposed that it's not funny.
That's why we kept it short and just put your email address on. So everything, I think, GaryBurke.Berkowitz.com is on the website. I think the newsletter for everyone programming AC comes in really handy. So,
you know what? I think I can't imagine. It's funny. I think everybody should subscribe to my newsletter because there's really some good stuff in there. As a matter of fact, I get criticized all the time. They go, Gary, you're really kind of giving it away. I mean, come on. So really, everybody subscribe. GaryBurke.com. Subscribe to it. It's free. What do you got to lose, right?
Gary, thank you so much. It's been a pure pleasure. Special thanks to Andy, our CEO, to Suzanne, who is engineering and putting this all together. Of course, Ken Benson, who prepped all these wonderful questions. And thank you to everyone who's been on here with us today for taking the time. We greatly appreciate the support on behalf of P1 Media and Benztown. Thank you. Stay safe and have a great day.
Bye-bye,
Absolutely.
Everybody.
And our next webinar, guys, tease for next webinar, Thursday, 22nd of September, 1 p.m. Eastern, Ronnie Stanton from the Inside Out, How to Succeed in Today's Reality, with our first Australian guest. I said it, Ronnie Stanton, who has successful program multiple formats in 3 countries. Today, Ronnie Stanton is National Director of Music and Regional Program for Chorus Radio in Canada. And he's going to share some great experience around the globe, basically, of his programming experience. And this is going to be Thursday, 22nd of September. Gary, thank you so much, man. It was an absolute pleasure. I'm definitely going to go and subscribe to your newsletter now because we'll also do a lot of AC imaging. So that's what I'm going to do right now. And was a pleasure talking, and thank you so much.
Well, and Andy, Suzanne, Chachi, thank you for having me. To everybody who has been here today, I hope you found it enjoyable and educational. And if you ever want to talk about radio, I love radio, so give me a call.
Absolutely. Thank you, guys.